the reason I added this topic is it's in the news a lot. Small modular reactors, advanced reactors, nuclear power uh, has an outsized um, role in shaping our vision of our future. I mean, it's going to do so many things. It's going to help us get to net zero. It's going to allow us to have much more energy independence. It's advanced technology and will supply jobs. And as a result, our government and other governments who, after Fukushima, lost their enthusiasm for nuclear power have regained it. And there's large sums of money coming from governments to basically put a thumb on the scale of whatever market signals there are to say, hey, we need to push in this direction. Now, it was just a question of boiling water or wasting money. I don't think it'd be worth election. I mean, after all, there are lots of ways we boil water. And I'm fond of saying that waste is what made this country great. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, most innovation, which we celebrate, is a result of waste. As I say, doing a lot of dumb stuff before you do something that you see, oh, this is smart. A lot of businesses go out of business before you discover which business should be in business. I think that's okay. And governments, in all fairness, aren't meant to make a profit. In fact, they're meant to lose money on things that we care about, like defense, the arts. I mean, I don't know, protecting rights, things that don't exactly have immediate economic profitability associated with them. I mean, maybe in the long run they do. But that would require, an awful lot of Hebrew, Hebrew, and Greek in the way of economic analysis to even say that was the case. I'm willing to say that, self-interest rightly understood involves probably a protection of self-government, certain principles. But I think if you made that argument, I'm not sure everyone would go absolutely and they'd know what you were talking about. So let's put that aside and say, well, the reason to talk about this isn't because of we have to prevent waste or, we have to worry about simply electricity. Um, After all, this is a course that has national security in its forefront. That brings us to that. There are two national security dimensions, and this is the first of two lectures to put a spotlight on the two aspects of nuclear energy that have national security implications. One is quite evident from the instruction already, and will become more and more evident with each lecture. Civil nuclear and military nuclear programs overlap. There are nuclear weapons programs that got quite a boost from reactors and enrichment and reprocessing facilities that were used for quite a while simply to boil water to make electricity for the national government's constituency, the public. This was the case certainly in Great Britain, in France, uh, certainly in the case of India, and I could go on with more examples. Some programs that were put aside were initially billed as civil programs in Sweden, for example, and in Australia that were actually weapons programs. And so we need to be alert to that. And certainly the reason we have an International Atomic Energy Agency that does inspections, and the reason we have export control laws relating to nuclear technology that might be significant, according to the NRC Section 110, from a nuclear explosive standpoint, is this connection. Now, we'll talk a little bit about that. It's because of that that um, you need to be sensitive to economics. I always like to say, if something's wasteful, it's not a disqualifying attribute for a government program. A lot of things we do are wasteful, and they ought to be. I mean, I don't know that uh, making everything efficient in the Defense Department would make sense. If you had that as a standard, a lot of things wouldn't get funded, and I'm not sure you'd have much of a Defense Department. It's not a very efficient operation, but you want a Defense Department, so it's okay to be somewhat wasteful. I mean, you don't want to give waste a bad name, but if something's wasteful, that's not a disqualifier. Something could be unnecessary. A favorite would be we do fund the arts. Now, they are not necessary, but I'm not sure that governments shouldn't give some support to the arts. My wife's an artist. Last I checked, she has a hard time making a living. But the walls look a lot nicer. So if you like nice walls, maybe that's okay. So it can be unnecessary. It can even be something dangerous. Um, I mean, there's a lot of things we experiment with that are dangerous, and because they're dangerous, the private sector doesn't want to do them. Mostly these are in the national security areas. However, when something is all three, dangerous, unnecessary, and uneconomic, you probably need to slow down. And it could be that what we need to be thinking about when you take in these two supplemental lectures is whether we ought to or not slow down. The other dimension of national security that's emerging, mostly now, right before our eyes in Ukraine, is that reactors can be stationary radiological dispersal weapons if they are uh, disabled in such a way that you have a release of uh, radiation in a significant fashion. Now, this has not happened, thankfully, but it's certainly something that people are biting their nails about now. And maybe we need to think about how likely that might be in the future. This shapes things. So, getting back to it, the reason it probably is smart to have a lecture on the future of nuclear energy, particularly the favorite son right now, which is small, advanced modular reactors, and looking at the military vulnerabilities of these things, is it could be that the overlap between civil and military is uh, going to grow rather than recede. It's a question, and certainly it it's starting to look like it might grow. And the reason that's interesting is we're going to turn pretty quickly here after this technical romp to the international control of atomic energy, or at least attempts at it. And you'll see in each one of these attempts recognition to a lesser or greater extent of about the possible overlap. And that all has been pushed aside pretty much in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and up until I think, I'd like to think up until now, as no longer something that's tractable or all that important. It could be that the people that looked at that overlap were onto something, and maybe it still is relevant. And it's a question for us as students of of policy questions relating to civil and military nuclear energy to look at. All right. Boy, that's a heck of a long apologia, but there it is. Why don't we get into this now that I've persuaded you, you haven't made a mistake to come to this virtual gathering.